Hey guys, so today I'm going to talk about the Excel Vlookup function. I'm going to talk about how to use this formula and when to use it, and I'm going to talk about a few examples. But first, allow me to say this, that I've been to a number of websites and a number of videos that talk about VLOOKUP, and I've realized that even though you can learn VLOOKUP just almost anywhere, um, when we do eventually use it in our workplace, we find that we are using it in sort of a different scenario, or we're using it in a different case, which if you have learned VLOOKUP the basic way by just putting in the formula can be a little bit difficult. So what I'm trying to do here is tell you how to use it in a workplace and similar examples that you'll find in your workplace. So let's just dive into it. This is my database that I have. Let me just give you a description of VLOOKUP. So basically the main purpose of this function is to look up a value in a database and return the value corresponding to that value that you're looking up that is present in the same row. So this is what you do. Uh, let's just dive into the example here. So we have this database here. Let us make it look a little bit more attractive, because that's what we like to do in our workplace. I go to View tab and I remove the grid lines. Then I make my titles bold. Do the similar thing with my example here. Now I have one representative called Andrews, and what I want to know is how much Andrews spent on airfare. We have the whole database here, all the representative names, airfare, units, unit cost, and miscellaneous expenses. Now let us dive into the VLOOKUP. Let us start by clicking equals to sign and pressing VL. Now when you press VL, the Excel function intuitively comes up, and you don't need to type anything more. You can just type tab and it will show you the whole VLOOKUP function. Now we start with finding our VLOOKUP value. Now what is the value that we are looking up? It is Andrews, isn't it? So we're gonna click here and select Andrews, put a comma here. Now it talks about table array. Now what it means is we're going to show this formula, the entire database, or specifically the two rows that we are working here. One that is acting as a lookup row, and the other one that we want as a return row. A return row will definitely have the return value, and over here the lookup row is representative and return row is airfare. So what we're going to do is we're going to select both of these rows and we're going to put a comma. Now, let me move up. Now, the next thing that we have here is column index number. Now, in VLOOKUP, it does not depend what the title of your particular row is. The way VLOOKUP uses to find the required return value is by numbering the columns. So the way you can number the columns is if the A is your lookup column, you can number A as 1, airfare as B, unit C, unit cost 3, units 3, unit cost 4, miscellaneous 5. So the return value that we want is from number 2. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put 2 over here. And up next is what sort of match do you want? Do you want an approximate match or do you want an exact match? Now in this case, what we're going to want is an exact match, because that's the kind of value we have. We have the exact name, and this is what we're going to do is we're going to put a 0 over here, or you can just click the false here and get the exact match. Now we close the bracket and we enter. $445 is what Andrews spent on airfare, and that's the way you use it. Now this was a very basic function. we're going to go in to a little bit more complex functionality now and make sure that we understand VLOOKUP very, very thoroughly. So now that we have learned how to use VLOOKUP formula and understood in what context it's used, let's use it in a little bit more complex situation. Here in this example, we have a list of representatives corresponding to which we want to find out airfare, units, unit cost, and miscellaneous expenses. Now, in our previous example, we have already set up the VLOOKUP function. Now, what we don't want to do over here is to have to write this VLOOKUP function all over again for each and every one of these cells. So if you're a little bit familiar with Excel, you would know that in Excel we can pull down formulas. And when we pull down formulas, it gets copied to all the cells that it's been pulled down to. But at the moment I cannot do it because if I do pull it down, as you can see, the formula changes. The formula changes because we are pulling it down vertically and the rows are changing. So the rows inside the formula changes as well. As you can see, the VLOOKUP value changes from H2 to H3, which is a good thing because our VLOOKUP value does indeed change. However, you can also see that the table reference changes as well, and which is not a good thing because we do not want to change our table reference. We want to keep it the same. In Excel, we can use the concept of fixing your reference value. In Excel, we do it using a $sign. So in order to fix a reference value or make it a constant, let's call it locking a reference value. So in order for me to lock the table, I need to put $sign before the column and the data reference. Now either I can do this like this, adding dollars before each of them. There's a faster way to do this as well. Just use F4. Use F4 again, and there you go. We have our table fixed. Now we enter, and as you can see, when I pull the VLOOKUP formula down, each and every one of the VLOOKUP formulas have a different VLOOKUP value as per the rows, but the table remains the same. And that's exactly what we want to do. Now, we know how to do it on a list, and at the moment we were only concerning ourselves from two columns, representative and airfare. Now let us look into the case if we want to go for more than one columns. We want to return more than one columns. Now what people normally would do is like they will just go to the other column, write the VLOOKUP formula once again, this time including the third column as well. Putting the constant here. And making sure it's the 1, 2, and third column, exact match, and enter. And this is correct. I mean, you can go on to each and every column and do this and then pull it down. But there is an easier way to do this as well. So, well, you've seen that all the columns are adjacent to each other over here. So what we can do here is select the entire table at once instead of the two columns that we are really interested in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the entire column here. I'm going to lock it, make it constant, and I'm going to press enter. Now it shows the same thing because the last formula also worked. Now what I can do is I want to make sure that when I move this over to the J column, I want the number of column from 2 to 3. And it's not happening right now, because if we do move it, as you can see here, it's not going to go to 3. It's going to stay at 2 because 2 is a constant in itself, and it's not moving. So one thing that we can do is use a reference again. So let's put airfare at 2, units at 3, unit cost 4, and miscellaneous 5. Now we have in our very first row 2, 3, 4, 5 numbered right above our titles. Now if I manage to reference to this column when it asks me for column index number, I can easily get the same answer for this, but when I do pull it across, it gives me answer for all the other values. So as you can see, it shows the airfare, unit cost, miscellaneous expenses for Andrews. And that's all it is. Now, right now, it might not seem much, but if you're dealing with data sets that are thousands, 1,000 rows long and say 50 columns wide, at that moment, you can really use this technique when dealing with VLOOKUPs. So we have managed to get all of these things for Andrew. And if we look at it, we did not want it to change our table array, and we did not want it to change the H column in our lookup value, but everything else changes. Now what I can do is I can pull all of these down one by one. Let's say, for example, all of this is it's not available. So I can pull all of these down one by one, or what I can do is another way to do this is just select all of this together and then pull all of them together at once. Oh, we're getting some error over here. Oh yeah, another thing that we have to make sure is the reference number that we just created does not change. So I pull it over here and then I pull it down. So see, this is a way you can make small mistakes and then can find errors. So what I did just now was I made a reference row for myself, which would change as I move through the columns. But what I failed to do was to make the row a constant. So when I pulled it down, instead of staying at the first row, it went down to the second, then third, then fourth, and fifth, and so on. So that's what caused the error, because because besides the fifth column, fifth row, there is nothing over here. So when it uses the other titles, it does not make sense. When we pull it down, it instead of using this cell, it starts using airfare cell, and that causes problems in the VLOOKUP function. Now we have used and tried VLOOKUP in a single list. We have used and tried how to use it. We have learned how to use it horizontally, pull it horizontally, and we have learned how to use it over large data set. Let's quickly go over the example when we have to do it in multiple tabs. So for example, we are here in a different tab, and again, we have information that we need. Again, equals VLOOKUP tab. This is my lookup value, comma. I go back to find my database. I select all of my database. Then I go back to my sheet. Or just make sure that you do not click over and over again. I know what I want. I want the second column, and I want an exact match. And there you go. For Sovino, the airfare is 230. Now, when you look at the formula, you can see there is a difference when we compare it to the other formulas. The other formulas were taken from the same tab, so the formula does not need to name the the tab name. But when we went into sheet 2 and tried to use a VLOOKUP from over there, you can see it says sheet 1 A3 to E45, which means that it's actually going into sheet 1 and then finding the data. So make sure when you look at this formula, you understand how it's working. Again, I'm gonna make a as a constant, use F4 over here, then over here again, and enter it. Again, I need a row that works for me as a fixed constant. And every time I move it through the columns horizontally, it changes the column index number. So I got the column index number as well. I make sure that the one that is the row number stays constant and does not change. Pull it horizontally and then pull it vertically. And boom, you have your final answer. That's how quickly you can do it, and that's how fast you can do it. And this is what I was talking about when I said that when we learn to use VLOOKUP, we use it by just a formula, but these are the small things that we can pull it horizontally, how to make sure that this tactic works, and then how to make sure that we can do it as fast as possible. So yeah, that would be all, friends. Thank you.